I grew up in Latin America, in a world where Islam was nothing more than a headline, a warning, a threat. Every time something terrible happened somewhere in the world, a bombing, an attack, a massacre, the images would flash across the television screen, and almost always those words would follow, Allahu Akbar. That's what I knew. That's what I learned. That Allahu Akbar meant destruction. That Islam was a religion of violence, of fear, of blood. Nobody explained it to me differently. Nobody sat me down and said, wait, those words mean God is great. Nobody told me that billions of people whisper that same phrase in moments of gratitude, in moments of beauty, in moments of deep prayer. I didn't know any of that. I only knew what the news showed me. And the news showed me fear, and I believed it, completely, without question. My impression of Muslim women was even worse. Every time I saw a woman in hijab, I felt a deep sadness for her. A pity I never questioned. I thought she had no choice. I thought she was trapped, maybe by her husband, maybe by her father, maybe by a system that had decided women were worth less than men. That's what I saw every single time. A woman covered from head to toe, walking behind someone, silent, invisible. I thought the religion had done that to her. I thought Islam had stolen her voice and her dignity. I carried those ideas for years, and I carried them confidently, the way you carry things you have never once been forced to question. They felt like facts. They felt obvious, and that made them dangerous. Then something happened, something small, something almost ordinary. But it changed the direction of my entire life. I started working alongside a Muslim woman. She was calm, she was warm, she laughed easily and spoke softly. And there was something about her presence that I simply could not explain. A kind of stillness, a kind of quiet joy that didn't seem to depend on anything external. She didn't need validation from anyone. She didn't seem anxious or stressed the way the rest of us always were. I watched her carefully, curious but still cautious. One day I asked her, carefully trying hard not to offend, why she wore the hijab. I was bracing myself for a sad story. For a story about pressure, about strict rules, about having no other choice. She smiled at me gently, and she said, because I chose to. I stood there, and I didn't know what to do with that answer. I started asking more questions, gently at first, like someone testing thin ice before stepping forward. She always answered with patience, with warmth, never with frustration or judgment. She never made me feel foolish for what I didn't know. She never made me feel like an outsider or an enemy. She just answered, clearly, honestly, with this quiet confidence that made every word feel true. And slowly, one answer at a time, the image I had built carefully in my mind over so many years began to crack. Then it began to crumble. I learned that Allahu Akbar meant God is great, not a battle cry, not a death sentence, but a phrase of praise and wonder. A phrase Muslims say when they wake up in the morning, when they eat, when they see something beautiful in nature, when they hold their newborn child for the very first time. A phrase filled with awe and gratitude, not anger and hate. I learned that the terrorism I had seen on television was condemned, deeply condemned, by the very religion it claimed to represent. I learned that Islam forbids the killing of innocents, that it forbids harm to civilians, to children, to the elderly, that those men on the news were not following their religion. They were betraying it in the worst possible way. And the entire Muslim world, over 1 billion people, was suffering the consequences of that betrayal every single day, carrying a label they never chose and never deserved. I had been blaming an entire civilization for the actions of a few criminals. That realization hit me like a weight I hadn't known I was carrying, and then suddenly it lifted. and in the space where all that prejudice and ignorance had been, there was something new, something uncomfortable and exciting at the same time, something like curiosity that had finally been given permission to breathe and grow. I started reading. Cautiously at first, the way you approach something you are not entirely sure is safe. I found the Quran, or maybe the Quran found me, and I opened it one night without expecting anything at all. I thought I would find violence. I thought I would find the harsh words behind the scary headlines. Instead, I found something I had never found anywhere else in my entire life. I found a God who speaks directly to you, not through complicated rituals, not through another person's interpretation, not through layers of hierarchy, directly, personally, intimately. I read, "We are closer to you than your jugular vein." I had to stop. I read it again and again, closer than your own heartbeat, closer than your own breath. A God who knows you completely, every fear you carry, every secret you hide, every silent prayer you have never said aloud to anyone, and loves you still. I had grown up Catholic. I believed in God my whole life, but I had never felt him like this before. Never this close, never this real, never this personal. I kept reading, night after night. I could not stop. Every answer I found opened 3 more questions, and every question led somewhere deeper, somewhere more honest, somewhere more real than anywhere I had ever been. I began to understand the prayer, 5 times a day, not as a burden or an obligation, but as a return to yourself, a return to stillness, a return to something infinitely greater than yourself. I began to understand fasting, how it strips everything away until you remember what actually matters, until hunger teaches you gratitude for every single bite you have ever taken for granted. I began to understand the hijab, not as a cage, not as oppression, but as a powerful statement. A woman saying, "I am more than what you see. Judge me by my words, my intelligence, my character, my heart, not by my body." And I thought of that woman at work, the one who had smiled at me so gently and said, "Because I chose to." She wasn't trapped. She was free. Free in a way I had never understood freedom before, and I wanted that freedom for myself. I remember the night everything became absolutely clear. I was sitting alone in my room and the house was quiet, and something inside me, something I cannot name and cannot explain and will never fully understand, settled into place. Like a piece of a puzzle that had been missing my entire life finally clicking in. Like a door opening that I had been standing in front of for years without ever knowing it was there. I knew. Deep in my bones, in my soul, in a place beyond logic and reason. I just knew. I wasn't becoming something foreign. I wasn't leaving myself behind. I was becoming what I had always been meant to be. The next morning I said the Shahada, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. I bear witness that there is no God but God, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. 12 words. And my entire life changed in the time it took to say them. People ask me what it felt like. I tell them it felt like exhaling after holding your breath for 20 years. Like coming in from a freezing storm and feeling warmth wrap around your body and realizing you had completely forgotten what warmth felt like. It felt like clarity, the kind you cannot manufacture, the kind that arrives from somewhere beyond your own mind. I cried. I cried for a long time, not from sadness, not from pain, from relief, from overwhelming gratitude, from the indescribable feeling of being lost your whole life and then suddenly, finally, being found. I started wearing hijab 3 months later. My family didn't understand. My friends asked questions I couldn't always answer perfectly. Some people looked at me differently on the street. Some relationships changed. Some days were genuinely hard. But every single morning, when I stood in prayer before the sun rose, when the world was still dark and silent, and I was standing before my Creator with my head bowed and my heart wide open. Every single morning I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choice. Not someone else's choice, mine. That is what I want people in Latin America to know. That is what I want anyone who grew up with the same terrifying images, the same misleading headlines, the same deep fear of Islam to finally understand. Islam did not take anything from me. Islam gave me the one thing I had been searching for my entire life without even knowing I was searching. It gave me peace. And if you are watching this right now, carrying the same ideas I used to carry, I understand you. I was exactly where you are, but I am asking you to do just one thing. Ask one real question. Talk to one real Muslim. Open one single page of the Quran. Not because I'm telling you what to believe, but because the truth deserves a chance to speak for itself. It spoke to me, and it changed absolutely everything.